What is going on, guys? As you know, I just ran the Boulderthon half marathon a week ago. So in this video, we're going to do something a little bit different. I am going to hyper analyze the entire race from start to finish. We're going to be analyzing a lot of the data from my COROS watch, and we ultimately want to find out what type of time we think I can run in a month at the Indianapolis half marathon. So let's get into this. In the bottom left-hand corner, you're going to see the course elevation, and it goes down for the first 5-ish miles, and then it's up for the next 6. Then the last 2 miles are flat and downhill. I also want to mention that this was done at over 5,000 feet of elevation, so there's a huge conversion for this race. One of the cool stats we're going to look at with the COROS feature is the effort pace, which is defined as a personalized metric that adjusts for trained and individual running efficiency to provide a more accurate measure of exertion. So this feature is going to help a lot because the course was so hilly and a lot of the miles were slow, but the effort pace is going to show really how hard I went. Okay, so let's get some sandbags out of the way going into this race. As you guys know, if you watched the previous video, I was sick for a whole week with a stomach virus leading up until this race, so I was not feeling good going in. Thankfully, I did come around just in time. I was able to eat about 2,500 calories the day before the race, which is still not really enough, but it was enough for me to get out the door and just give this a shot. So the goal for me was to just go out conservatively and then pick it up on the way back when it was hilly and try to catch some of the runners in front of me. Shockingly, I ended up feeling really good after starting the race, and a lot of that is because there's about 45 feet of elevation loss in the first mile, and I also was probably a little bit fresh because I barely trained that week, so there's all these little things that add up to making you feel better. For shoes, I was wearing the Nike Vaporflies. I used to wear the Nike Alpha Flies, but I felt like they were a little bit aggressive on my Achilles and they just felt clunky, so comment down below if you have any better shoe options, but as of now, the Vaporflies are pretty good. But I came up to a mile in 5:13, which is on the left side of the screen. You have the heart rate there at 173, and then the average effort mile, which was only actually 5:15 because we had 0 feet of elevation gain and 46 feet of elevation loss. So the first mile was super easy, as I've mentioned. Even though I felt really good after a mile, I could already feel my stomach getting weird, and spoiler alert, if you haven't seen my last video, I do end up peeling off to a porta potty in between miles 6 and 7, and it was only about 20 seconds lost in the race, but this is where I began to feel the stomach coming up. It just made the first 6 miles of the race really unenjoyable, but we came through 2 miles running 5:17. Heart rate was up to 182. The average effort mile was 5:19, and again, we had 0 feet of elevation gain and 49 feet of elevation loss, so quite another easy mile. So honestly, so much of this course's elevation loss was in the first 2 miles, which isn't even super helpful in a half marathon because we had to go up so much on the second half. I passed the lead women shortly after mile 2 and ran a 5:21 for mile 3. This was a 5:17 effort mile though, because we did have 10 feet of elevation gain and only 30 feet of elevation loss, and you can see my heart rate was only 184, which is very low for me. So at this point, I was feeling so smooth, besides the fact that I obviously did have to go to the bathroom, and I was running with the lead marathon men. And just a quick reminder, this data is coming from the COROS Pace Pro and the COROS Heart Rate Monitor. Click the link down below if you're interested in any of those products. Mile 4 was a 5:23, and the effort pace was 5:17. Heart rate holding steady at 183, and it was very even in terms of elevation as we gained 16 feet and lost 20 feet. So the course was finally starting to flatten out. Mile 5 was 5:27, which was one of my slowest miles on the day, and that's because I really had to go to the bathroom badly at this point. There was equal elevation gain and loss on this mile. The effort pace was 5:23, and the heart rate was still holding steady at 183. So again, I was feeling super relaxed at this point, and this is when the miles start to be uphill. So after mile 5, I started to push the pace with the group that I was with and went to the front of it and eventually did get a little bit of a gap on them. As you can see, we're starting to go a little bit uphill at this point because you can see the runners who are on their way out and we're on our way back. This was also such a cool shot. So I hit 6 miles running a 5:26. The heart rate started to go up to 186, and the effort pace was a 5:11. So we're finally cooking here a little bit with the effort pace, and that's because the elevation was more than the elevation loss. But of course, right where I started to get some momentum, this is where I also saw the porta potties. So I figured this is my best chance to go to the bathroom.
I gotta take a shit first.
So skip this section if you don't want to see me going to the bathroom, but I'll try to analyze it this time around if you've already seen it one time. So as soon as I got inside the bathroom, I immediately was like, all right, I just got to go get this thing out right away. And I did go to get some toilet paper because I'm not that gross. I wanted to at least be able to wipe. I did check and see if there was hand sanitizer, and I did not see any. So it was a little bit gross in that regard. But boom, finished up and then came out 20-second time loss. Honestly, not really that bad at all. But more importantly, I felt so much better after that, and it was going to help me so much for the second half of the race. But mile 7 came up around a 5:46, a 5:30 effort though. So really it was like a 5:10 effort at this point, because subtract another 20 seconds because of the time loss. 49 feet of elevation and only 7 feet of elevation loss. So it was a very, very difficult mile 7. But mile 8 was even hillier than mile 7. I ended up running a 5:24, but look at that effort pace, people. 4:45. And that's because there was 82 feet of elevation gain and only 10 feet of elevation loss. The heart rate stayed steady at 187, but this is what I'm talking about. This is why I wanted to analyze this race. From a first glance, you'd think I was just running mid 520s the whole time, but running the 520s uphill at altitude is so different than doing it downhill, and that's also why I started to catch up to 5th place. Mile 9 was a tough one. I went 5:22. The effort pace was 5:12. The heart rate remained at 187. There was actually more elevation loss than gain on this mile, but it was a tough one because you went out and back on this 180 at one point, and those always throw me off, but it was overall pretty solid. Mile 10 was a 5:24 and another 5:12 for the effort pace, and this mile had a little bit more elevation gain versus loss. The heart rate was starting to creep up there a little bit, up to 189, but after we hit mile 10, the next mile was really, really brutal. We were on this little sidewalk concrete thing, and the whole mile was uphill. I ended up running a 5:34, which the effort pace was 5:03 though, because there was 62 feet of elevation gain. I knew after this mile I was pretty home free, so I could finally step on the gas. My heart rate was still only 189, so really not crazy high for me, so I knew I could catch up to the guy who was in 5th place, and I did eventually catch up to him, running a 5:04 for mile 12. And this effort mile actually was even slower. It was 5:11, and that's because there was 62 feet of elevation loss on this mile, which made it so much easier. I knew at this point I could probably hold 5th place nicely. I looked back right there to make sure that the guy wasn't getting too much on me, and he did end up staying with me as best as he could, and I knew it was just a game of cat and mouse, and I talked about this in my previous video, but the plan was to just sit behind the guy as best as I possibly could and make sure not to let him too far out of my sights. And at this point, I was getting the benefit of the first 5 miles of the race going really slow and under control, because I felt totally fine in the last mile, and I just knew that I had the strength there, and I saved my energy up early on, so I'd be able to kick and run well the last little bit. Also to the left, you can see there's a bunch of other runners running next to us, and that is the 5K finishing. They finished at the same time that the half marathon did, but this guy made one more hard push, and I did cover his move. And at this point, I went right in front of him and decided to just go a little bit early and try to break his spirit, and it ended up totally working out. Now, this final stretch is slightly uphill too, so it was a little bit difficult of a final mile to run on mile 13. But again, I did have the energy, so I was feeling pretty good. I ended up running a 5:06 mile 13. You can see though the effort pace was a 4:56, so there actually was more elevation gain on the last mile than loss on the last mile. So I kicked it in all the way home, was feeling good about the day, and ended up running a 70:34 for 5th place overall. I put my result into an altitude converter, and it says that my 110.34 is equivalent to a 107.10. If I was at sea level and ran a 107.10, I'd be pretty happy with that considering how hard the course was. My best half marathon time that I have run comes from Mesa back in February. I ran 65:51 on a super easy course. So I would say running a 67:10 on a hard course is pretty solid, especially when I almost wouldn't even say that I was doing this as an all-out effort. I think if things go well for me at the Indianapolis half marathon, I could finally challenge the 65-minute barrier. Let me know if you guys enjoyed this race analysis video, and if you think it helps understand a little bit better of what shape exactly I am in. We'll see you guys in the next one.